Number 5 on this list is the Higuan Opera House. This opera house is located in Beijing and has been standing there for quite some time. These days it acts as an opera house and a museum, regularly putting on various theater shows. However, it wasn't always used for this purpose. The building was constructed over 200 years ago in 1807, and back then it was a home for the poor. It was built by a philanthropist whose intentions were good, wanting to help those in need and give at least a few a roof over their heads. Problem was that the builders didn't do their research well enough, because this house for the poor was built directly on top of an ancient graveyard. The spirits of this ancient graveyard weren't too pleased that this building got put directly on top of them, and as you may expect, have been haunting it ever since. A ghostly apparition has never actually been seen here, but hundreds of visitors have heard noises coming out of thin air. The noises apparently sound as if somebody is screaming at the top of their lungs. This screaming can happen at any time and any place in this opera house, but it seems like the courtyard is tied the most to these reports. There's even a legend surrounding this courtyard. Locals say that if you pick up a stone and throw it in the courtyard, then this voice will directly scold you for doing so. It seems that this voice that scolds you is very scary to those that do this, because there's no reports of anyone picking up a second stone and throwing it again. I suppose all of this should teach you that if you ever intend to construct a big building, do some research on the ground that you're building on before you start. Number 4 on this list is the Songpo Library. This place is now a library, but like a lot of the haunted places on this list, that wasn't what its initial purpose was. It was initially someone's residence, Wu Senggu. Wu Senggu lived from 1612 to 1678 and was instrumental in the beginning of the Qing dynasty in China. He was a Chinese general for the Ming dynasty, but in 1644 decided that it would be in his best interest to betray that dynasty and switch sides. He did this by allowing the Manchu army safe passage through the Shanhai Pass, one of the passage points of the Great Wall. Had he not done this, the Ming Empire would still be standing, and Chinese history would be very different. Betraying an empire and etching yourself in Chinese history takes a lot of time and effort. This was obviously a lot for Wu, and balancing family with historical betrayal was a little bit too much for him to juggle. One thing had to give, and it was the family. So without so much as an explanation, he abandoned his lover, Chen Wanwan. Chen Wanwan, alone in this house and abandoned, fell into a deep depression and hung herself in this home. That's right guys, even though this library has a deep history of a traitorous general, it's actually the ghost of his abandoned lover that haunts it. After her death, her spirit never left this place, and even when it was converted into a library, she still hung on. It's said that her ghost will occasionally show herself to visitors of this library if they're by themselves. She will have deep bruises around her neck, apparently from the rope that she hung herself with. She will also be crying, except not audibly. Tears will stream down her face, but she'll remain almost expressionless and just stare at those who she appears to. Anyone who has seen her has said that they were extremely unsettled by the vision and can never go back to that library again. Lots of the workers at this library don't last very long either, because after they see her, they immediately quit. Her appearance can be very disturbing, and for that reason, I don't recommend going to check this library out. Number 3. Raoji Film City. Raoji Film City is one of the biggest film sets in the country. In fact, it's actually one of the largest film complexes in the entire world. I mean, it's a film city. How many other film cities are there really? It's a big attraction for movie lovers who come the world over to see its extravagant displays and exhibits, but also entices paranormal hunters looking for proof of the other world. And there's a little something for everyone here, you know? It's a real family place. So where does the haunting come from? Do the ghosts just love the silver screen? Well, Raoji Film City was allegedly built on an old Nizam battleground. The Nizam of Hyderabad was the ruling caste of the area in the 18th century. Now, if these stories are true and it is built on an old battlefield, then it makes sense that there would be a good amount of lingering evil and restless spirits trapped in the soil that haven't moved on. Dying violently tends to make ghosts. Guests of the film city claim that while visiting, lights will flicker and turn on and off at random. Now that could be bad wiring, but it also could be troublesome spirits. Where things get kinda spooky is the reports of crew members on film sets getting injured under mysterious circumstances, equipment malfunctioning, or outright being destroyed in front of people's very eyes. And these are some of the more common reports of things happening on the cursed set.
Women in particular have felt targeted by the ghosts or spirits in the Raoji film city. Actresses have claimed that they felt like they were being watched in their green rooms or even feeling a supernatural tugging at their clothes during filming. Now I'm sure they make all kinds of genres of movie at the Raoji film city, but if you want my professional advice, I think they should definitely consider filming a horror movie there. It sounds like they would save a ton on the special effects budget, or maybe they could make a documentary. Do you need to pay a ghost if you're gonna have a ghost in a movie? Do ghosts still have the same workers' rights? Somebody look into that for me. Number 2, the Charleville Mansion. We're headed back to Shimla for this next one. It sounds like if you're booking a trip to India to take in the sights and the spirits, Shimla is the #1 place to be. Beautiful and filled with ghosts. Once you're done checking out the tunnel, take a trip to the Charleville Mansion, said to be the home to an old poltergeist. It's a century-old abandoned fort built during the British rule, and its first owner was a British officer whose name has seemingly been lost to time. Probably something like Wilford Brimley, though that's a different guy. When the officer and his wife moved into the mansion in 1913, they were unaware of the rumors surrounding it, and they just thought they were getting a great deal on rent. A previous owner had already fled the property because of the hauntings that had taken place. They say that there was a ghostly figure that would slowly apparate in the middle of the night and would smash objects and throw them around the house. Now, despite this house being haunted, the officer himself didn't personally believe in ghosts. He wanted to test this theory of whether or not there was a poltergeist in his home, and so he locked all of the doors in his house and waited, just sat there twiddling his thumbs, tapping his feet, waiting for a ghost to approach. Well, lo and behold, after locking all the doors, he heard a crash upstairs and ran upstairs, opened the door, and found that this one room had all of the furniture and all of the mirrors just utterly demolished. I think he moved out the same week. They say he moved out shortly after, but I can't even imagine he finished packing his bags. Now, the next owner was one Victor Bailey, an assistant secretary working on the railway construction at the time, and I gotta say, there must be some really bad vibes at the Shimla Railway if 2 entries on this list involve it. Anyway, the Baileys moved into the mansion, and at first it seemed like a great deal. Beautiful mansion secluded away from the rest of the world. Until one day at a dinner party, one of their guests reported that he was talking to a lovely English gentleman. Victor Bailey was a bit confused, and when he went back to go introduce himself to this guest, he watched the man disappear into the room the poltergeist destroyed, just vanished out of thin air, and the Baileys packed their bags and left shortly after. The mansion is now deserted and is a hot spot for paranormal activity, so enter if you dare. I actually don't even know if you can go in. Look into that maybe. Number 1, Damas Beach. We all love a good beach vacation. If you're looking for somewhere sweet to lay back while sipping on something sweet, India is full of some beautiful beaches. But we are not here to talk about anything lovely, okay? This isn't top 5 lovely, although that would be just delightful. I would love to work on top 5 lovely if we're ever gonna make that a channel. Maybe you guys are listening. We're going to Damas Beach, located along the Arabian Sea in Gujarat. The first thing you'll notice about this beach that stands out is the black sand, which is already pretty unnerving. Most beaches don't look like that. The local folklore says that Damas Beach used to be a burial ground for Hindu people, and as such, generations of spirits are ingrained into the sand. Building on this legend says that the reason for the obsidian-colored sand is years worth of cremated ash by the burning of the dead, eventually overtaking the sand on the beach. So, I don't know, if you're thinking about making a sand castle, maybe think twice about that. Maybe keep the flip-flops on too, okay? So what do people say about the spirits out there? Well, it's been said there's a negative aura present in the air, and even just while visiting, tourists and residents say they can feel this sense of dread that something is wrong immediately walking around there. Locals say that the spirits of the dead walk down the beach at night, and visitors claim to hear inexplicable voices, scary laughter, and crying. So if you want a nice, long, romantic walk down the beach in India, just keep in mind that you're gonna have a bit of an audience with you. Some people go so far as to say that there's been apparition, floating orbs seen around the beach. I was having a bit of trouble finding any photos of any ghost sightings around the beach. People say dogs behave strangely, walking through it, howling and barking. There are some who believe that the animals can see spirits we can't, and this could be evidence of that. Now, the most extreme legends say that the tourists go missing around midnight on the beach, but I want to believe if people kept going missing on a beach, they'd shut it down, but I don't know. I've seen Jaws. I know that's not actually that likely.
Number 5 on the this list is the Forbidden City. The Forbidden City was constructed in the early 1400s for the Ming Dynasty. This palace served as the base of operations for any political ongoings that China was involved in for several hundred years. It was also the home to the Chinese emperors and their families. The complex is massive, consisting of 980 buildings, 8,886 rooms, and being 178 acres in area. The Forbidden City was listed as a World Heritage Site in 1987 and is no longer used for political business, but now acts as a tourist attraction. This palace is estimated to be worth over $70 billion US, which makes it the most valuable palace and piece of real estate on the entire planet. I imagine that when they were valuing this palace though, they didn't factor in that it's deeply haunted. The Forbidden City has been home to many Chinese emperors during its existence. During its time, it's seen them partake in a wide array of atrocities. The murder of Chinese slaves has happened countless times. Granted, this hasn't always been done by an authoritative figure, but skirmishes between servants and slaves have happened many times throughout this palace's history. And also, it hasn't just been slaves, but others have been murdered within these walls too. Many people speculate on some of the sinister acts that have happened here, but many of those acts have never been proven. This leads to the secrecy that has shrouded this place since its construction. Nowadays, this Forbidden City is haunted by several ghosts and ghouls. One of the most famous sightings was from a guard. They swore that while they were on duty, they were approached by a lady in white without any face at all. This legend has been echoed by some of the other people over the years, although this lady's origin is unknown. Many people also report the sound of music coming from thin air as they walk through the palace. They also hear the laughter and crying from other women that can't be seen. It's believed that these are the ghosts of some of the concubines that used to live in this palace. The Forbidden City is one of the coolest palaces in the world, but we have to remember that it was forbidden for a reason. Number 4 on this list is Twinm Road. This road is a highway in Hong Kong that links Twinmun and Suan Wan. The highway is only 19.4 kilometers long and for the most part is well kept. It was constructed in 1977 and during its short time of being active has developed quite the legend around it. This road is considered to be one of the most haunted roads on the entire planet, and that is largely due to the significant amount of death that it's seen. In 1978, it had its first fatal crash, and since then it has amassed massive numbers of accidents. In fact, this road has had hundreds of accidents, with many of them being fatal. Some people blame poor road design, but the surviving victims from the crashes, they blame ghosts. This road is believed to be haunted by a bunch of spirits. It's said that these accidents keep happening because the ghosts will appear in the middle of the road. Upon first glance, people will think that they're about to hit a person, swerve to get out of the way, and effectively cause an accident themselves. The biggest problem with this road is that it keeps getting more and more haunted. Like a virus, the people who die from spirits then become the spirits that are haunting the road. Nowadays, there are hundreds of spirits that haunt this road and can appear at any time right in the middle of it, causing chaos and death. One of the most notable accidents that happened here was that of a bus in 2003 where 21 separate people died. This highway is a hazard to say the least, and one that I would avoid going down if I was ever visiting China. Number 3 on this list is the Chenway Church. Even though this place is often referred to as Chenway Church, it's actually just a house that's located in the Dongchen district of Beijing. This place is widely known around China and has gotten the title of being Beijing's most celebrated haunted house. It got public acclaim when a horror movie called The House That Never Dies was released in 2014 and was set at that home. The whole origin of this house is pretty hazy, with no official records explaining its exact construction. That being said, many people believe that a British priest was the first to start building it, but never actually finished the job because during the construction, he disappeared. After it never became a church, it was converted into a home for a political party member, but he rarely stayed there. Similar to the Songpo Library, his absence had a deep and dark effect on his wife's mental health, and she inevitably took her own life. Along with the priest's disappearance and the wife's death, 3 people who were working on the home are said to have disappeared while they were here, never to be seen again. All of these deaths and disappearances have contributed to the stories of this house's haunting. The most commonly spotted ghost here is that of the woman who took her own life. People are very scared of ever seeing her because they believe her ghost had something to do with the disappearance of those 3 construction workers. Almost everyone who walks by this house, even just on the outside, says that they feel an immense sensation of dread as they do. It's also reported that during the summer months, even if it's scorching hot outside, the second you pass through the doorway, everything gets super chilly, as if the home is void of life and feeling. Tunnels have also been discovered under this house, which just add to the lore and legend of this place. Unlike the Songpo Library, where the ghost will just appear and be disturbing, it seems like the spirits that dwell here are actually very dangerous, and for that reason, it should definitely be off your travel plans if you ever find yourself in Beijing. Number 2 on this list is the tomb of General Juan. I found an excellent passage explaining the history surrounding this tomb written by Dong Huaxi Weiji. He writes, General Juan Chonghun is famous for his military command during the Ming Dynasty, where he almost single-handedly fought off the Manchu army in the 1630s. Despite the general's loyal efforts to protect the land and the imperial family, devious plots were planted in the emperor's ear, making him suspicious of Juan, and thus his life came to a tragic end when the emperor condemned him to death by 1,000 cuts. Juan is said to have stated before execution that his soul will always guard Luidong Peninsula. Tortured and severed into pieces, the people of Beijing were so upset with him for his accused disloyalty that they allegedly rushed to buy and eat his remains. His head, however, was salvaged by a faithful troop of Wan Weis who buried it at Guanshu Men, and his family has guarded it ever since. Whether he is seeking revenge or simply holding to his word and guarding the territory, the general is said to have been seen wandering around the area at night. First off, before I even talk about the haunting, I can't even imagine dying the way that Juan did. It's no wonder his spirit refuses to pass on. Not only was he falsely accused, but to die by 1,000 cuts, then get tortured, and then have your body be picked apart by the locals is truly horrendous. If he is still guarding the peninsula, then all the power to him, but I also completely understand if you need to get revenge after something like that. Regardless of his motives, I imagine that any threat towards this area would cause retaliation from his spirit, so probably best to play it safe and avoid the tomb at all costs. Number 1 on this list is the Ghee Mansion. The Ghee Mansion is one of the strangest and most unique ghost stories that I've ever heard. It all started with the Ghee brothers after World War II. They decided to move to Shanghai post-World War II in hopes of finding a better life. This was the best decision that they ever made because once they got there, they basically won the lottery. In the early days of living in Shanghai, the brothers stumbled upon an abandoned warehouse that was filled with cans of paint. At that time, the price of paint was very expensive, and this warehouse was as good as stumbling upon buried treasure. They sold the paint that they found and got a fortune for it. That's when they decided to build this mansion. They didn't stop at just spending their money like this though. The brothers had a taste for the lavish lifestyle. They bought a plethora of wild animals and had them live with them. Tigers, pumas, reptiles, and various other unconventional pets lived at this mansion. Until one day the brothers just disappeared. No one has any idea why they left or what happened to them, but they were just gone. With the mansion abandoned, some of the neighbors are said to have looted this space, and during their theft, they got carried away and murdered some of the animals. They didn't stop just there though, because it's even believed that they ate some of the animals after the fact. Now, what's left of this mansion is haunted by those same animals that were killed so many years ago. These animals aren't pleased with those that come here either. Workers who came to this mansion later have been said to have been attacked. In fact, some of them have been rushed to emergency rooms with bite and scratch marks from these ghostly beasts. People have reported seeing lizard-like things scurrying around the mansion and jungle cats standing at the top of the stairs looking menacing. I've never heard a story with a bunch of ghostly jungle animals before, but that's what we have here, and from all the reports, these creatures aren't the friendliest. Number 5 on this list is the Hotel of Doom. Yep guys, there's literally a hotel in North Korea that's been nicknamed the Hotel of Doom. It sounds like something straight out of an Austin Powers movie, but I can promise you that Dr. Evil is not residing there. That's because the hotel itself, the largest building in all of North Korea, has never had a single guest in it ever. It's completely abandoned and never fulfilled its initial purpose of being the most prestigious hotel in North Korea. In fact, fact, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, the 1,080-foot tall building is the tallest unoccupied building on the entire planet. 105 stories of just absolute nothingness. North Korea never finished the building because they just simply ran out of money. The whole country is estimated to have a gross domestic product of about $40 billion, and the building is estimated to take roughly $2 billion to finish. So, to finish this hotel, the country would need to allot 5% of all its money to get it done. Needless to say, it won't be happening anytime soon. Even though this Hotel of Doom isn't housing any human visitors, that doesn't mean that someone isn't putting it to good use though. Well, maybe someone is a poor choice of words. It might be better to say something. Since the exterior construction of it finished in 2008, there have been rumors circulating about some sort of creature living in this hotel. Not a physical being like a werewolf or a beast of some kind, but a shadow figure that floats throughout. A little bit like a Dementor from Harry Potter, but even less humanoid than those were. The sightings have been few and far between because no one ever goes into the hotel. It's only ever been spotted from the ground looking up. People reported a sense of uneasiness when walking past this building, but the building itself is also very intimidating. North Korea doesn't have many buildings of this stature, so this one definitely sticks out like a sore thumb. If a shadow creature has taken up residence here, then it's honestly done pretty well for itself. In fact, it may own one of the most expensive, albeit unfinished, properties in all of North Korea. Number 4 on this list is the prisons. And yes, you did hear that properly, guys. Prisons as in plural, not just one, but all of them. North Korea is very secretive about everything that goes on there, so making a list about this country is pretty tough. Because of that, it's hard to identify one specific prison that's haunted, but based on the stories of these places, I'd honestly assume that all of them are. The amount of death that happens at North Korean prisons is actually messed up. In fact, a judge who survived Auschwitz said that these prisons are just as bad. The first section on Wikipedia in regards to these prisons writes, North Korean prison camps have conditions that are unsanitary, life-threatening, and are comparable to historical concentration camps. A significant number of prisoners have died each year since they are subject to torture and inhumane treatment. Public and secret executions of prisoners, even children, especially in cases of attempted escape, are commonplace. The mortality rate is exceptionally high because many prisoners die of starvation, illness, work accidents, or torture. There have also been reports that even if your father committed a crime, for instance, well, you'll also go to jail for it. Innocent people are being sent into these places with no due process and dying in these horrible and harsh environments all the time. Just how some of those German camps are haunted by those who were taken far too soon, I have to imagine that the same thing's going on here. Now, we don't know for sure, and there aren't any specific stories that have come to the light, but that's mostly because North Korea keeps all their info airtight, and there have only been a few stories that have even come out about survivors of this place. I feel like it goes without saying, but obviously, this is a spot that you should just never go. Number 3 on this list is Fangdu. Fangdu had to be included in this list because it's also literally called the Ghost City. It is a massive collection of shrines and temples that are dedicated to the afterlife located on the Ming Mountain. This place was built over 2,000 years ago and is deeply rooted in Chinese culture. The reason that it's called the Ghost City isn't just because people believe it to be haunted today, but because of a legend that took place many years ago. 2 imperial officers named Ying Changshen and Wang Fangping went to the mountain to practice Taoism. Whilst they were at this place, the pair performed a ritual to become immortal. When you combine their 2 names into Ying Wang, you get the translation King of Hell. This goes along with the stories that these 2 immortal beings will drag people down to the underworld. This site and these 2 immortals are so critical in Chinese culture because it's believed that every single spirit will pass through this place when they die. That's right, guys. Fangdu is the location where a spirit will go immediately after their physical body ceases to function. There are 3 tests that the dead will go through before moving on to the next life. First, they must pass the Bridge of Helplessness. Then, they go through the Ghost Torturing Pass. And then finally, they will wait at the front of Xianzi Palace. It's here that the ghost must stand on a stone for 3 whole minutes. If you are to be dragged down to the underworld, then it's at this time that it will take place. All of this ghostly activity has made this place very haunted. People have reported sinister laughs and strange noises coming from this place at all hours of the day. People have also reported hearing blood-curdling screams coming from nowhere. They think that these screams are coming from the torturing of those ghosts. If all of this is true, then there really is no point of visiting this place. If all of this is true, then there really is no point in visiting, because regardless of how you spin it, we're all gonna end up there one day anyways. Number 2 on this list is the Great Wall of China. The Great Wall of China is one of the 7 wonders of the world and truly a sight to behold. The total length of the Great Wall of China is roughly 21,196 kilometers. This wall was built over thousands of years, with the initial construction starting in the 7th century BC. Its purpose was largely to act as a defense mechanism between other nations and also to monitor what was coming in and out of their country. This wall is massive, more massive than anything we can really comprehend. In fact, to put it in perspective, I'm filming this in Toronto, Canada right now. Traveling to China from here is roughly 11,000 kilometers, meaning that the length of the Great Wall is long enough to go all the way to China and then come all the way back. Due to its massive size and means of construction, it's estimated that 1 to 2 million people died from just the construction of this wall alone. These 1 to 2 million people who died whilst making this wall are said to haunt it to this day. The ghosts of their souls still linger around various sections of the wall, with many sightings happening throughout the years. People have seen these ghosts laboring away or just standing at the top of the wall looking down upon them. They've also heard the noises of somebody working or the moans of someone in pain with no person in sight. 1 to 2 million people is a lot of people to have died from this ambitious project. That amount of untimely death has to leave something behind, and I wouldn't be surprised if this Great Wall truly was haunted. It's one of the 7 wonders of the world, so I won't tell you to never visit, but if you do, then just be wary. Number 1 on this list is the Xiao Ying Pun Community Complex. This community complex, which is located in Hong Kong, was listed as one of the most haunted places in China for quite some time. It started off, as many haunted buildings do, as an old mental institute. This institute was built in 1892 and operated as a mental hospital until World War II. During World War II, this building was used as a hospital for any people fighting, but then in 1947 went back to its initial purpose of housing those who were clinically insane. It continued to function like this until 1971, when it was eventually closed down and the building was abandoned. As with many mental hospitals from that era, there were a lot of human rights violations that took place. Couple that with some of the death that it saw in its walls, plus its abandonment, and the legend of a potential haunting started to run rampant. In the recent years, this place has been converted into a community center, but even this immense renovation hasn't stopped the ghostly sightings. The most famous apparition is that of a man dressed in traditional Chinese clothing. It's said that his presence isn't uncommon, and he will often engage people in conversations if they're by themselves. It should also be noted that the mental hospital before it closed down was ravaged by 2 separate fires. Some people died during these blazes, and the spirits of those burn victims have reportedly been spotted in the past. People have said that they've seen them standing at the end of the hall staring at them, completely burned and bloodied. With a history like this location has, it's no wonder that spirits are still sighted walking among it to this day.
Coming in at number 5, we have Ozone Disco. What a name, I kind of want to go. In March of 1996, a tragic accident happened in Quezon City's Ozone Disco. The local universities had just done their yearly graduation ceremonies. The students were looking to celebrate, and there was a party being thrown for them at the disco. There were around 350 guests attending that night, even though the building had only been cleared to safely hold 35 people. Due to the large amount of people in such a small place, when the fire broke out, they did not stand much chance of escape. Tragically, around 200 people did not make it out that night. Not only did the fire consume the lives of many, but others were trampled in the chaos of trying to escape. The one fire exit the building had been blocked by the building next door, meaning the large amount of people who fled to it to escape became trapped. It was reported that when entering the building to look for survivors, the bodies were piled up waist high. Survivors of the fire explained how around midnight sparks started flying from the DJ booths shortly after smoke appeared. Partygoers thought it was part of the experience, that it was all pyrotechnics to mark the new day. This meant that many did not flee as soon as they should have. All of this combined into a huge tragedy that claimed the lives of so many who were just about to start their lives. Since the incident, the club has been closed and abandoned. However, those who are around the club at night have witnessed some paranormal activity. Some have heard music coming from the club's doors or seen disco lights from a distance. You might think these are just kids who have snuck into party, but others have heard disturbing screams for help, but as they got closer to investigate, the screams fade away. There is a clear warning to those who might try to visit the place today that it's not safe. You might meet a paranormal spirit angry from the tragedy, or you might have a dangerous accident of your own. Coming in at number 4, we have Malacanan Palace. Malacanan Palace is the White House of the Philippines. It is the official residence and principal workplace for the President of the Philippines. It was originally built in 1750, so it has a long history, making it perfect for some paranormal happenings. The building has been home to many important people, but has also been a part of revolutions within the country, leading to many tragic passings on the property. In particular, there is one story that during one of the revolts by the people, they stormed and seized the home. They found one presidential worker who is now unknown and made their own justice. Although this is not a confirmed story, it is often told to explain one of the paranormal guests who has been pictured outside of the home. They have been named the Headless Ghost. The photo captured shows the outside of the palace with a headless figure facing the camera. It is thought that this poor soul was separated with his head before passing and now walks the halls searching for it. He is not the only ghost that has been spotted on the premises though. There have been sightings of former presidents, such as Manuel Quezon and Manuel Roxas. There is also a report where Governor Amy Marcos, daughter of Ferdinand Marcos, actually saw Quezon's ghost at one point during her father's presidency. I guess when you dedicate your life to serving as president, it is hard to let go of the place you call home. If you were to visit, maybe keep your camera handy. You never know who you might just see.
Number 3 on this list is Kim Jung Il's tomb. Kim Jung Il was the leader of North Korea for almost 20 years before passing in 2011. The Kumsusan Memorial Palace is a massive palace that used to house the initial ruler of North Korea, Kim Jong Il's father, Kim Il-sung. Once he died though, this massive place was converted into a mausoleum to respect the great leader and then later his son as well. This place is creepy as all holy hell though, and is definitely haunted by these old leaders. Let's just take a quick look at what they currently have Kim Jong Il chilling in. It's this massive all glass container that he's been mummified in. His embalmed body just lies there all the time, and it's actually a tourist attraction now. North Korea has opened this up to the public if you want to go and pay your respects to their great leader. If you do go, which I don't recommend doing because it's super creepy and kind of weird, but if you do, then ABC News writes, all visitors are required to pass through jets of air to cleanse them of dust. Tourists are required to bow at the feet and arms of the dead father and son. However, they are not permitted to bow at the head as it's considered disrespectful. Cameras and phones are not allowed. Apparently, the ghosts of these two former North Korean leaders haunt this place, and people have seen their spirits wandering around the building. Kim Jong Il and his dad weren't the greatest of guys when they were alive, so I can only imagine that going to visit them in spirit form probably isn't going to be too much better. Number 2 on this list is the 38th parallel. The 38th parallel, according to Google, is a circle of latitude that is 38 degrees north of Earth's equatorial plane. It crosses Europe, the Mediterranean Sea, Asia, the Pacific Ocean, North America, and the Atlantic Ocean. The 38th parallel north formed the border between North and South Korea prior to the Korean War. This 38th parallel is actually a demilitarized zone between North and South Korea now. This area is really difficult to get across though for your average Joe. It's riddled with landmines, and on either side of the borders there's a sizable military presence just waiting to strike if you do attempt to do anything. Regardless of how dangerous it is to cross though, many North Koreans have attempted to get through this zone and into South Korea to try and escape their current life that they have in their own country. Over the years since this zone has been there, many North Korean citizens have risked their lives trying to get across this place. There have even been stories of people getting in vehicles and just gunning it as fast as they can, hoping to get to the other side. If they do manage to make it the whole way, then South Korea is typically sympathetic to their cause and will invite them into their own country as a Korean citizen. Many of them don't make it though. They're usually gunned down and stopped before they can make it far at all from their own country. Because of this, it's believed this area is haunted by the ghosts of those who tried to make it across and couldn't. These people were so close to salvation but just couldn't quite make it the last little bit, and now their souls forever remain here wishing they could have just pushed a little bit further. Not many people have seen them because this is a super hard area of the world to get to, but those who have said that they look to be in sheer agony, that they cry out and reach for those that they seize in an attempt to get these people to save them. For more reason than one, I don't recommend going to the 38th parallel. Number 1 on this list is Sinchon. The North Korean town of Sinchon is located in the South Hwanghae province of North Korea. This town was apparently the site of what is referred to as the Sinchon massacre. Now the reason that I use the word apparently there is because this massacre is kind of all up in the air. The North Korean government claims that from the 17th of October to the 7th of December, the United States military killed just over 30,000 North Korean citizens. This next part was actually released by the North Korean Central News Agency in 1998, and fair warning, it's pretty graphic in its detail. They say the American soldiers drowned over 2,000 innocent people by dropping them from Soktan Bridge. They also drowned more than 1,000 women in Sowon Reservoir. Upwards of 1,200 patriotic-minded people detained in an ice warehouse were bitten to death by military dogs. The headmaster of Younghae-won of Jungsan Primary School was sawed up alive. They even talk about how the American soldiers performed horrible atrocities on children, but I actually can't even say how they described it on YouTube, or else this video would definitely get taken down. Now, even though this is what the North Koreans have come out and said, the South Koreans heavily dispute this. They say that it was the Korean right-wing extremists and communists who performed these killings. Regardless of who was actually responsible though, or the true death toll figures, something horrible did take place in this town. The atrocity here left its mark, and it's believed that those who were killed haunt this place to this day. The innocent souls still wander around this town and can't find peace. Glowing orbs and ghostly apparitions are regularly spotted here. It isn't just one ghost or one type of ghost either, but a horrifying variety. Men, women, children, ghost-like figures have been spotted of all of them before. Definitely not a cute and quaint town that you would want to visit if you ever did find yourself here.
Kicking off at number 5, Building 2283, Okinawa. Throughout modern history and following the events of World War II, Japan has seen a large military occupation, the majority of which come from the US. Because of that, these collisions of culture have been met with some pretty spooky outcomes. One of those is Building 2283 at the Kadena Air Base, which is actually a single unit family home in a residential area, which was historically reserved for mid-grade officers and high-ranking civilians. Well, of course, no one lives there anymore, and the Kadena Air Base goes out of their way to make sure the building is eerily maintained. Whatever happened before the US moved in is unclear, but tales of a grisly murder are the main consensus. A number of families occupied the residence, but all of them soon reported the same stories. Water faucets and lights turning on and off by themselves, the sound of children laughing and crying just out of earshot, and the sight of a woman washing her hair constantly in the utility sink. Allegedly, the origin of the haunting comes from a family who occupied the house sometime in the late 70s, a teenage girl who was obsessed with keeping herself clean, and an abusive stepfather that stabbed her to death and then killed himself. Next up at number 4, Gridley Tunnel, Yokosuka. Again, another ghostly tale that comes from the military. The Gridley Tunnel on the Yokosuka Naval Base is a narrow, one-way tunnel that runs directly underneath a hill from Gridley Lane to Nimitz Boulevard, an access route running away from Yokosuka that was repurposed from an ancient fortification that existed before the modern naval base was built in the 1870s. Allegedly, the staggering amount of the exact same sighting is what has given this ghost its legend. As people drive through the one-way tunnel, they glance in the rearview mirror and see a bloody samurai chasing them. Some people have been so startled by the sighting that they've totaled their vehicle into the side of the tunnel, and the ghostly samurai often emerges on rainy nights between midnight and 1 AM. As the legend goes, the apparition is the ghost of a long dead samurai who was on his way to avenge the death of his feudal lord when he was ambushed by the same assassins and brutally killed. Allegedly, because he failed his mission of vengeance, he cannot leave the tunnel and is left to wander eternally.
Coming in at number 3, we have Clark Air Base Hospital. Clark Air Base Hospital was used during World War II and the Vietnam War. It now lays abandoned on a redeveloped Air Force base. It is said that as soon as you enter the destroyed building, you instantly feel the paranormal energy that belongs there. The locals believe it to be cursed and dare not enter. Due to this, it is seen as the most haunted hospital in the country. The hospital has been ravaged by time, most parts overgrown with greenery, with others simply falling apart. The hospital today does still attract ghost hunters. Due to the amount of pain and suffering that occurred during its time, there are plenty of lost spirits trapped. A number of visitors have reported hearing voices echo through the empty halls of the hospital. Some hear screams. It is said that the voices of those trapped are of the soldiers who lost their lives in the war. It seems they feel they have unfinished business in the world. Many would have left behind their families to serve their country. These are not the only patients still staying there though. The first floor ward was home to the hospital's pediatric center. People have heard the screams of newborn babies and children laughing. One security guard even heard the running footsteps of what sounded like a child. This entity ran straight past him one night while on patrol. He has since refused to patrol within the hospital walls. The hotel did still operate after the war until a nearby volcano erupted, covering the hospital in ash. This was taken as a sign by the locals that nature was warning them to stay away. There are also those who ignore the warnings and venture inside. Just be warned, it seems to have a habit of causing tragedy. Coming in at number 2 we have Laparole House. The Laparole House was built by Roberto Laparole in the 1930s. During World War II the house was used by Japanese soldiers. They were reportedly a nasty group of brutes. They attacked local women, tortured suspected Thais, and even ended their life once they received any information that they had. The house is said to have seen many horrors due to all of this, and the home was never the same after the soldiers left. Those who had been there within this time warned others to stay away. The house transferred ownership after the death of the head of the Laparole clan. They attempted to maintain the home, but the years and horrors do show on the home's old exterior. The house has withstood much more than those around it, both man-made and natural disasters. To everyone's surprise, the house was still standing after the deadly earthquake of 1990. In 2013, the home was turned into a museum. It was at this point that we started to hear more details about the hauntings inside. The show has been visited on many ghost haunting shows, along with being featured in a film. Those who have visited the house have told of what they found and why the house is visited often by paranormal investigators. One visitor claimed that they heard screams coming from the lower sections of the home. They rushed to go see if someone was hurt, but they found nothing. As they read more about the home, they believe this could have been linked to where the torture happened during the war. Others felt a dark presence in various sections of the home, cold spots or a feeling of sadness that disappeared as quickly as they had felt it. Some said they felt watched, like there is an entity in the home that no one can see, but it is watching all who visit closely. One man claimed he heard water running in the rooms, but when he went to turn it off there was nothing there. Not even a source for any water to be coming from. The home is haunted by the ghosts of the past, but might also hold an ancient entity that causes you to feel watched. Either way, this is not a home I'll be visiting anytime soon. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Mangat Cave. Mangat Cave got its name from the smell of the accumulated bat droppings inside the cave. Located in the central Philippines, this is a scary location due to more than the hauntings. Many people are scared of entering dark and possibly unstable caves, so this one contains more than just the fear of confined spaces. The cave is popular by those who like to explore deep into caves in their spare time, but do it at your own risk. The cave is said to be haunted by lost caving groups. The cave does not offer much light, and the deeper you go, the more lost you get. There have been a number of groups that have gone lost throughout the years with no remains ever recovered. There are so many hidden corners within its maze you will never be found. Those who explore it today have encountered a number of paranormal occurrences. Some report seeing shadows not cast by them or their group, like there is someone else with them. Others have heard footsteps scrambling around as if in panic. Finally, the further in you travel, the more you hear a distant scream of help. Often only one of 2 members of your team will hear this. No matter how far towards the voice you go, it will keep seeming out of reach. This causes people to go further and further into the caving system until their team bring them to their senses to head back. Those who have experienced this believe it may be how the others have gone missing. Some say there may be a demon living deep within the cave looking to bring the lost souls to feast on.
Number 5 on this list is Dunstay LAANG. This temple is located in Bhutan, an often overlooked nation that's nestled between Nepal, Bangladesh, and China. This nation is largely populated with Buddhist monks and is known for its monasteries, fortresses, and incredible landscape. The country itself is already shrouded in mystery, and this place is probably the best example of that. Holidify writes, Dunstay LAANG was built by the Thangtong Gyalpo in the year 1433. It's said that the monument was constructed on the body of a monster that was causing harm to the inhabitants. There are mysterious stories about this place, and locals believe that the divine power of the temple would retain the demon from coming back to life. The building is in the form of a diagram mandala, and different floors represent the earth, the heaven, and hell. The horror-inspired frescoes on the walls leave visitors dazzled and add to the mystic charm of this place. Dunstay LAANG is carefully preserved, and it requires special permission from the authorities to get into the landmark. Any place that's guarded heavily like this and not allowing the public, plus it has deep ties to the devil and hell, obviously needs to make the list. Also, the entire legend surrounding it, where it was built on the body of a monster, already adds to the mystery surrounding this spot. Stories have come out of this place with some of the very few people who have been inside of it being met with spiritual visitors. Potentially this strange temple is actually a portal of sorts to connect us of the living world to those of the dead. It's impossible to say, but it also doesn't help that the authorities won't let us in to explore it. If you do manage to find a way inside, then you'll need to bring a flashlight though. There's no lights in this place at all, and it's said to be completely dark on the inside, which just adds to the mystery again. Number 4 on this list is the Plain of the Jars. Located in Laos, this site is definitely a weird one. A bunch of stone jars, 2,000 of them to be exact, all scattered throughout the fields of this hilly terrain. These jars are very sizable and made of pure rock. In fact, the word jars is pretty generous because it's basically just a bunch of rocks with holes on the top of them. What they're used for, who put them here, and how they got here though are all a big mystery. Maybe the most interesting thing about these jars is the story with World War II. In World War II, the site in question was heavily bombed. One would imagine that some stones with holes in them would be obliterated from a heavy barrage of bombs, but they weren't. In fact, it didn't look like they took any damage at all. Some people believe this is because these jars have a deep spiritual connection to them. This lends itself to the origin of these jars, where people think that they were used for some interesting sacrificial rituals. Granted, some other people believe that they were used to make wine. A bunch of jars to sacrifice people, or a bunch of jars to get drunk off of. I guess you guys be the judge.
Coming in at number 3, the Hanging Ruins, Osaka. In the Shinsekai district of Osaka, there lies the remains of a burned out 4-story building that has eerily been dubbed by locals as the Hanging Ruins. As the legend goes, in the early 2000s, the apartment building burned out in a tragic fire, where it remained for years untouched and unrepaired. In 2005, an employee of a local spa located from across the ruins spotted a strange long object dangling from its roof. Well, the employee decided to call the authorities, who investigated and realized that the strange object was in fact a corpse. The next day, there was a mysterious pair of shoes dangling from where the body was found. A few years later, another local was passing by and they spotted what appeared to be a life-size doll hanging from the same rooftop. Eerily enough, it turned out to be yet another corpse, and yet again another mysterious pair of shoes were found dangling the next day. Eventually, curious folks started throwing pairs of shoes from the building in tribute to the mysterious corpses found there. As far as the residents of Osaka are concerned, there have been at least 3 bodies found in the Hanging Ruins, yet who they were or what they were remains a mystery. Swinging in at number 2, the Doroto Ruins, Tokyo. Doroto, also referred to as the Haunted Temple of Hashioji and translates roughly to the End of the Road Temple, is known as one of the most haunted locations in Japan and has been host to some grisly and ghostly tales throughout its history, ever since it was first constructed in 1590. As one of its many legends goes, in 1963, an 82-year-old woman who was in charge of maintaining the site was approached by a robber. The woman tried to fight back against the criminal and was tragically killed as a result. Days later, locals reported the ghostly sounds of a woman sobbing in the forest, a spirit that was tragically bound to the ruins. Exactly 10 years later, in 1973, a female university student was caught up in an affair with her English literature professor, who was married and had 2 small children. When word of the affair got out, things ended tragically, and the professor ultimately killed the young girl, burying her body in a shallow grave at the site of the Doroto Ruins. It didn't end there though. The act of murder drove the professor to madness, and weeks later, the corpse of him, his wife, and his 2 children were found washed up by some nearby cliffs. To this day, locals have reported hearing a young woman whispering, "I'm here, I'm here," alongside the sound of an old woman sobbing. And finally, at our number 1 spot, Aokigahara Forest, Yamananshi. Of course, it has to be perhaps the most notorious and infamous location in the whole of Japan. Aokigahara Forest, also known as the Sea of Trees, is a beautiful location that historically has harboured a very dark and eerie past. Since the 1800s, the forest, which sits in the shadow of Mount Fuji, has had a reputation with being a gateway for the Yurei, the ghosts of the dead in Japanese mythology, and has been revered as a location and site for communicating with spirits. It was also connected to the ancient practice of ubusute, a mythical Japanese practice where an elderly person was taken to a forest to die. It wasn't until 1961 that the forest began its grisly reputation with suicide, when a famous Japanese writer, Seiko Matsumoto, penned the novel Nami no To, Tower of Waves, where the lead characters tragically committed suicide in the confines of the forest. In 2010, more than 200 people attempted to take their own lives in the forest, and tragically, that figure continues to rise, as Japan struggles to confront its staggering suicide rate and battle with mental illness. Aokigahara Forest continues to be a human reminder of these lives lost and the tormented spirits that still linger there.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Kunala. We'll kick off the list with a tale that seems to transcend geography entirely, the tale of the disappearing hitchhiker. Kunala is India's answer to the ubiquitous urban legend. For those unfamiliar, the disappearing hitchhiker is the tale told around the world with different variations based on where exactly it's being told. Usually it involves a downtrodden person looking for a ride on the side of a remote road. If you give them that ride, they'll enter your vehicle but disappear soon without a trace. If you ignore them, you'd better be ready for trouble. Back to Kunala. It's been said that there is a stretch of highway known as a hot spot for misfortune. Accidents would occur regularly, earning it the name of Kunala. Soon, people began to believe that the whole area was haunted. These beliefs were compounded when reports of ghostly women started cropping up. People told tales of seeing a woman in a black sari holding a baby, trying to flag down vehicles. If you pick her and the child up, they'll get in the back, remain quiet for a bit, and then disappear entirely. However, if you ignore their pleas, the woman will curse you, dooming to die in a car accident. The amount of accidents around here are high too, making the tale of the dangerous woman even more believable. Make sure you're being a good Samaritan when cruising the back roads, eh? Coming in at number 4, we have the Jinn House. A jinn is an intelligent spirit that may appear in many different forms. Often they're malevolent, causing problems for people all over the place. Sometimes they will possess people, other times they'll lead them astray. However, like most ghostly figures, it is possible for a jinn to have good intentions. But that's not the case in this tale though. People tell of a house haunted by such a spirit, the location of which seems to vary. It seems that there was once a family who lived in said house, but they were scared off by the spirit. Or maybe something more sinister happened. These days though, the jinn is more likely to get into harmless trouble. Mostly. Apparently it will throw visitors' shoes out of the house. See, it's considered good manners to remove one's shoes before entering a home in India. The jinn uses this as an opportunity for mischief, throwing the unattended footwear out onto the street. Many have claimed that they never believed this, and that is until they saw it with their own 2 eyes. You might think that a few flying shoes wouldn't be enough to condemn a house as haunted. Maybe somebody's just pulling a harmless prank after all. However, there have been reports of odd and upsetting sounds coming from within the house too, making the haunted tales seem a little more real. Add in the fact that many have reported becoming ill soon after entering, and you've got a house that might be best left alone. Who knows? Maybe the house is structurally unsound and the jinn is actually a friendly one, encouraging people to leave before it falls in on them. Or maybe I'm just being optimistic.
Number 3 on this list is the Ryukyu Islands. These islands are a chain of islands that are located off of Japan. The islands, although they're very beautiful and have some amazing scenery, aren't really mysterious in their own rights. It's what's located in the water beneath them though that has a lot of mystery and lore surrounding it. Under the water of the Ryukyu Islands are what many believe to be an Atlantis-like city. It was discovered in 1995, so very recently considering human history. At first, this ancient city was thought to be just a naturally formed monument, a rock formation that just happened to be thrown together by the earth underwater. However, as more experts looked at it, the theory that it was man-made started to gain a lot of traction. It's a mysterious pyramid-looking structure that nobody can really explain. Nobody knows how it got there or what it was used for, if it was man-made. Also, think about it if it actually was man-made like people are suggesting. Either we made it underwater, which makes absolutely no sense at all, or we made it so long ago that the water levels rose over top of it. Meaning that we're talking about something thousands and thousands of years old. What the heck were these people building here thousands and thousands of years ago, and why were they doing it? Number 2 on this list is the Mustang Caves. These are absolutely wild caves and really don't make a lot of sense. Tripoto says, being one of the world's greatest archaeological mysteries, the Mustang Caves lie in one of the most remote and isolated regions in the Himalayas. The landscape is unlike anything else found in Nepal, with strangely sculptured rock formations comprised of nearly 10,000 den openings perched more than 150 feet above the ground. It's unknown who dug them, since whoever did would have had to scale a near vertical rock to do so, a task almost impossible to accomplish by even experienced climbers. No one knows what their purpose was either, with theories ranging from living quarters to burial chambers. A visit to this mysterious spot will definitely leave you amazed and equally confused. These caves literally make zero sense, guys. It is straight up a cave inside of a mountain. Like, how on earth do you get to that place on the mountain of the cliff face to begin with? And then once you're there, how do you dig a massive hole to get these caves? Explorers have found mummified bodies in these caves before that can be dated back to 3,000 years ago. That is a long time ago, when people wouldn't have presumably had the technology capable of constructing things like this. There's also been a lot of sculptures, paintings, and other things found in these caves. However, none of what has been found indicates which group is responsible for making these things in the first place. They also don't know why they're there either. It's possible that these were just burial sites, but it also seems like overkill to build these cliff caves for just something like that. Others have speculated that these spots are used to practice advanced tantric yoga, or back in the day, perform some sort of ancient rituals. It's likely that we won't ever know the full purpose. And number 1 on this list is Fangdu. Fangdu, or better known as the City of Ghosts, is one of the most spiritually connected places in the world. Atlas Obscura says, the city has been around for nearly 2,000 years, filling it with a spooky sense of the past. Its origin story begins back in the Han Dynasty, when 2 officials decided to run away to the area and live out their lives, where they eventually, the story goes, became immortal. Yin and Wang, the names of the officials, were combined during a later dynasty to mean King of the Underworld. Most of the popular landmarks in the City of Ghosts have names that reference the afterlife. Last Glance at Home Tower, Nothing to Be Done Bridge, Ghost Torturing Pass. Covering the sites are statues and other artistic depictions of ghosts and devils, terrifying works that represent what happens to those who haven't lived good lives after theirs is taken from them. Less popular, but no less fascinating, is the theme park haunted house made to represent the terrors within the afterlife, complete with neon paint and vendors hawking scream masks alongside an alleyway. The giant face seen in the hill is called the Ghost King, and it holds a Guinness World Records title as the biggest sculpture carved on a rock. At 138 meters tall and about 217 meters wide, the Ghost King can be seen from all around the city. It's believed that every single person who dies must pass through this city before reaching the full afterlife. In this city are 3 tests for these souls. Wikipedia says that first they must pass the Bridge of Helplessness. This stone bridge was built during the Ming Dynasty and is a test for good and evil. It has 3 arches and only the middle one is used for testing people. There are different protocols for crossing the bridge depending on sex, age, marital status. At the bridge, demons allow or forbid passage. The good are allowed to pass, while the evil will be pushed to the water below. This is now done as a tourist attraction, and performers characterized as demons momentarily stop tourists on the bridge, but finally allow them access. Then the dead must proceed to Ghost Torturing Pass, where they present themselves for judgment before Yanlao Wang. This is the second test. In this area there are large sculptures of demons. The third test is done at the entrance of Tianzi Palace, where the dead must stand on a certain stone on 1 foot for 3 minutes. According to legend, a virtuous person will be able to do it, while an evil person will fail and be condemned to hell. Clearly a super mysterious spot that you probably weren't supposed to see until you die.
Coming in at number 5, we've got the Lotus Pond. Across all cultures, bodies of water are considered scary in some way or another. Ships have sunk, people have drowned, bad weather has brewed, etc., etc. There's a certain mysticism to water, and we as human beings are fascinated by it. Of course, water on its own can't be scary. We've got to add something else to the mix. How about water plus adultery plus murder? Everyone's gotta be afraid of at least one of those things. All classic themes. So here is the tale of the Lotus Pond. One day, a young woman was waiting for her boyfriend by a lotus pond. As she waited and waited, she got more impatient. He was making her wait, the bastard. After a while, she decided to look around and see if he had maybe been waiting for her at the wrong spot. During her search, she discovered something quite awful. Her lover was away loving someone else. As one might imagine, she did not take this news well. In a fit of sorrow, she threw herself into the lotus pond and drowned. Nobody knows what happened to her boyfriend, but I think it's safe to assume that the next time he walked by the pond, her spirit dragged him into the murky water. These days, it's said that if a couple plans to meet by the lotus pond, they'd better be very careful. The ghost of the girl will call out to any boy nearby, and if he even so much as looks towards the water, he'll be drowned. And that's what you get for even looking, you dirty dog. Now, the Lotus Pond has such a bad reputation that many folks refuse to go near it. And if you do decide that it would be a great spot for a picnic, you'd better bring your horse blinders. If you hear a girl calling out near this pond, don't respond, don't look, hell, don't even turn towards the sounds, unless you really, really like chilling below the water. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Poor Maid. Who's ready for some more adulterous urban legends? So this one's a little more macabre than the jilted pond dweller. This story comes from one of the preeminent Chinese supernatural writers, Gan Bao. Apparently his father was a bit of a womanizer and had maintained a long-running affair with one of the family's maids. This didn't sit well with Gan's mother, who begrudgingly allowed it to happen for years. However, when the father died, she decided to take revenge. The family had a tomb made for Bao's dad, meant to eventually house the mother as well. But when old Daddy-O was buried, the mother also had the maid buried with him, alive. That's some hardcore revenge right there, don't you think? For years, the maid remained underground in the tomb, unbeknownst to anyone other than the mother. Then, 10 years after the death of the father, the mother joined him in the afterlife. Gan Bao had the tomb opened up so they could place her body there as well, and came across an unpleasant surprise. Firstly, he never knew that his mother had the maid buried alive, so there's that little shock to start us off. But amazingly, she was still alive. Emaciated and weak for sure, but alive nonetheless. She was nursed back to relative health and questioned about her survival tactics. Had she been crawling out for sustenance and then returning to the tomb out of some self-flagellating guilt? Had she foraged for grubs and wastewater? In the end, the only explanation she could give was that the ghost of the father had brought her all she needed to survive for years. I suppose he felt bad that his wife had punished this young worker in such a horrible way. Nobody has seen any ghosts walking around with food and water near the tomb since, but folks definitely keep an eye out just in case. Coming in at number 3, we've got ghastly future seers. Folks who claim to be able to see the future are found in pretty much every culture too. There's something about not knowing what will happen next that makes some people desperate for information. So of course, psychics and soothsayers have come out of the woodwork to try and leverage some expertly vague predictions. However, when somebody can predict events extremely accurately over a short period of time, you have to wonder if something paranormal is going on. There was a case in Panchgani where a woman claimed that she could see 15 minutes into the future. At first, her family thought she was joking. Soon, she was able to tell them exactly what would happen over the next 15 minutes with incredible accuracy. This both impressed and terrified her family. After her predictions became more truth than fiction, she started denying herself food. She wouldn't eat, drink, or take medication. To make matters worse, the family refused to seek help for her as they were afraid of the stigma surrounding her purported abilities. They were eventually able to get some help from a paranormal investigative team who brought holy objects imbued with positive energy. The prevailing theory was that the woman was possessed by a dark spirit who was then using her for personal gain. A side effect of this was her future sight. Once the paranormal team showed up with their implements, the spirit appeared to leave her body, taking with it the Nostradamic effects. Could demons and spirits provide us with visions of the future? It's hard to say for sure, but this story seems to say so. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Lonavala ghost. This tale comes from a member of the Indian paranormal team. They've been investigating paranormal activity for the better part of a decade, doing plenty of ghost walks in purportedly haunted areas all over India. A lot of the places they visit have, well, exaggerated reputations, but apparently a trip to Lonavala uncovered more than what they bargained for. Lonavala is known for being a romantic getaway of sorts, with plenty of greenery and tiered waterfalls to boot. Apparently ghosts find it an attractive place too. The team member who told the story was with 4 other people, and they had stopped their car for a smoke break. The wind was blowing westward, and all of a sudden a can flew south against the current. The group was a little freaked out by this. They went back to the car and found that the windshield was totally fogged up from the inside. At this point, they knew something was up, so they asked any presence to reveal itself. Nothing happened, so they all got in the car. Right before they drove away, there was a knock at the window. However, the 5 paranormal investigators were sure that they were the only ones around. After this knock, the car began to shake violently. One person described it as if they were in a tin of biscuits. Being seasoned paranormal investigators, they all took out their recording devices. A woman could be heard speaking in Marathi and told the tale of her death. She and some friends had come out to Lonavala and were lost. Before she could find her bearings, she took a wrong step and fell off a cliff, and she's roamed the area as a ghost ever since. The team asked if there was anything they could do to help her pass on to the next life, but she never responded. So take this as a warning. No matter how picturesque a location is, there might be something sinister lurking in the shadows. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Udhampur Army Quarters. This one is well known enough that people will tell you to actively avoid the area if you're on vacation. This old military compound is said to be haunted by supernatural souls. Locals have seen floating apparitions for years. These specters will appear in the sky for a few seconds at a time before disappearing into the dark. To make things spookier, as these spirits fade away, they make weird noises and produce flashes of light. This petrifying display has disturbed folks for ages. Some say that these figures are the ghosts of long-dead soldiers visiting their old stomping grounds. Others claim that they're apparitions of ghouls visiting Earth looking to cause trouble. Even though these oddities have only been spotted between 1 and 3 a.m., many warn people away from the area entirely. You can never be too careful, apparently.
Number 5, the Sulu Archipelago and Sea. The Sulu Archipelago, located in the southwestern regions of the Philippines, is known for its stunning natural beauty, but it is also known for the complex challenges that have risen. The region consists of many small islands, including Sulu, Tawi-Tawi, and Basilan, and is surrounded by the Sulu Sea. The current state of the Sulu Archipelago and its surrounding seas involves a mixture of socio-economic, security, and political concerns. The Sulu Archipelago has been labeled as a level 4 safety risk by the United States Bureau of Consular Affairs, and it is strongly recommended that you do not travel or visit the area. The Sulu Archipelago is currently facing high rates of crime, civil unrest, rebel forces, and abductions. Armed groups are currently and consistently plotting abductions, bombings, and other attacks, with no discretion or care for citizen casualties. They attack with little to no warning and specifically target tourist locations like markets, malls, or government facilities. Rebels are abducting people on land and sea for ransom, bombings, and other attacks that target US citizens, foreigners, civilians, and local government institutions, security forces, and authorities. The US government has a limited ability to help or provide services to civilians because US government employees have to obtain a special authorization to travel to the affected areas. The Philippine government declared that they are in a state of national emergency. There are a lot of pickpockets, scammers, internet scams, and credit card scams. People are warned to turn down offers of food, drinks, or rides from strangers. Travelers traveling alone have been abducted after they were slipped a strong sedative. Because of the current climate, the Sulu Archipelago is not a safe place to visit, and it is definitely not a safe place to live. I think that too often people think that wars and organized criminal attacks are a thing of the past, or that they're exaggerated. They're not. If anything, the attacks that are shared are often sugar-coated. This is all happening now. People right now, people your age, people my age are being killed, tormented, abducted, SA'd, and are living in constant rational fear. A lot more attention definitely needs to be brought to the situation, and the fact that any coverage surrounding the Philippines is so unbelievably minimal and inaccessible is so saddening, and I'm sure frustrating for anyone who has loved ones in the Philippines or lives in the Philippines themselves. Number 4, De La Salle University. De La Salle University is a private Catholic research and educational university. It was established by the Institute of the Brothers of the Christian Schools in 1911 as De La Salle College, which changed to De La Salle University in 1975 when it was granted university status. When it was founded, the De La Salle brothers were nervously reluctant to open the school because Americans insisted that the first school made should only be available to the ruling Filipino elite. However, a school for the upper-class children of ruling elite families who need good moral and spiritual training was opened. By 1921, the school had 425 students. The school offered amazing programs and was widely appreciated for the educational staff and grand accommodations. But During the Second World War, De La Salle was used as a secret shelter for displaced citizens, wounded soldiers, families, and freedom fighters at the beginning of the Japanese occupation. But on January 2nd, 1942, it was occupied by the Imperial Japanese Army and made into military defense quarters. Several bombings and attacks occurred on campus, but classes did continue until they were discontinued and forced to vacate the campus at the demand of Japanese forces. Most people left the campus, but Egbert Xavier Kelly refused to leave. So on February 7th, 1945, he was abducted by Japanese soldiers, harmed severely, and then killed. On February 12th, just after noon, 20 Japanese soldiers forcibly entered the campus and massacred 16 boys who resided in the chapel of the campus and an additional 25 other residents. There were only 22 survivors. It's now said that the ghosts of the students, teachers, and families are searching for safety. They're still trapped in the same place they died. It has since become a dark tourism location, which a lot of people find to be extremely strange. Tourism that focuses on places with dark or tragic histories, like cemeteries, war sites, churches, or sites that people passed at. Since the site is an active school, tourists are not very welcome to visit the location. Many people do try to sneak in, but it's highly discouraged, and any overly curious onlookers may be arrested, charged with trespassing, or have legal action taken out against them.
Coming in at number 3, we've got The Last Bus. In the same way that fears related to water and adultery cut across all cultures, it seems that late-night public transit has a similar legacy. And really, why wouldn't it? Being in an enclosed space that is difficult to immediately exit late at night, traversing potentially unfamiliar terrain, is fertile ground for horrifying happenings. And just such a happening makes up the bones of this urban legend. In the mid-90s, a bus was heading to Beijing's Fragrant Hills. As it trucked along, 2 men attempted to flag it down. This was odd, considering that they were not at a bus stop, but the driver was feeling generous that day. Turns out there were 3 men, 2 of which wore traditional ancient robes, and 1 more who was being held up by the other 2. As the bus rolled along, it slowly emptied until there were only 2 passengers left, not counting the 3 latecomers. A young man and an old woman both sat there, looking at these pale passengers. Suddenly, the old woman accused the young man of stealing her wallet and demanded that the bus driver let them off so they could take this matter to the police. When they got off, the man was furious. Not only had she falsely accused him of committing a crime, she had also had them get off in the middle of nowhere. Not even a police station was nearby. However, she had a good reason to cry wolf. She'd noticed something nobody else had. The 3 men had no legs. They'd been floating at the height of standing men and therefore must have been ghosts. Who knows what might have happened if they stayed on that late night bus with the 3 phantoms. Coming in at number 2, we've got Single Braid Road. What could be a reference to the shape of the road is actually a morbid description of a terrible death that supposedly occurred here. Let this be a lesson to you all. Don't jump from trains. Okay, I'll explain. Way back when, it's said that there was a young couple. The man had all of his paperwork sorted out, but the woman did not. She, being an illegal immigrant, was living a life a little on the edge. Partway through the journey, some police officers boarded the train in order to check everyone's passports and such. Realizing this would not end well for her, the young woman decided to hop off the train. Unfortunately, she had done her hair in a very structurally sound style that day, a single long braid. When she jumped out, her hair got caught in the window, ripping her scalp from her head and taking her face along with it. After having most of the skin on her head removed, she crawled her way to Single Braid Road and died there. Gruesome, right? Well, the story doesn't end there. Apparently, if you head down Single Braid Road, you might come across a young woman with a long braid. Only men can see her, supposedly. If you approach her, she'll turn towards you and reveal that she lacks any facial features. I'll leave you to imagine what might happen next. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Suicide Shopping Center. Look, I get it. Sometimes malls make me want to hop over the guardrail and into the fountain below. We've all been there. However, so many self-inflicted deaths have occurred at this shopping center, folks are starting to get suspicious. Since it opened in 2004, over a dozen folks have committed suicide outside of Liwan Plaza. Some say there's a mysterious presence that might give the unfortunate souls a little push. These claims are backed up by a variety of strange discoveries that occurred during the building of said plaza. See, while they were developing the land, 8 empty coffins were discovered buried below. They did their best to work around this seemingly cursed discovery, first by constructing the building to appear octagonal and then by contacting a Taoist priest. When the holy man arrived, he let the others know that the coffins were meant to prevent evil from spreading in that area. The thing is, the coffins can't do that job if they're removed in the process of building a shopping center. Uh-oh. Seems that the strange noises and unfortunate deaths tended to drive customers away. It's too bad, isn't it?
Number 5, Bangar Fort. Now, if you Google Bangar Fort, if you're planning a trip up there anytime soon, almost every result will give you back something like India's most notorious or India's most haunted. So maybe that should give you a bit of a sense as to what's going on here. It's bad news. In fact, the place is said to be so filled to bursting with malevolent spirits that the Indian government actually restricts tourists from visiting after sunset for fear of spiritual danger. Let's take a look at the history of the Bangar Fort, one of the most notorious haunted places in India if the search engine is anything to go by. The fort was first built in the 17th century, and according to local legends, a religious ascetic lived nearby to the fort and insisted that any house built near the fort shouldn't be taller than its own house. Not sure why, but he just didn't want to be upstaged, I guess. If the shadow of any house fell on his own, he would destroy the fort, he threatened. When columns were added to the fort that casted a shadow, the fort was destroyed and abandoned seemingly overnight. Now, a variant of this legend suggests that a priest who practiced black magic and was a practitioner of the occult was in love with a princess who lived in the fort. He offered her a love elixir, and when she refused his proposal, he cursed the entire village, condemning it to be damned by the spirits for eternity. Locals claim that walking by the Bangar Fort, you can hear women screaming and crying from within at night, and strange otherworldly music can be heard playing seemingly from nowhere. Other residents claim that they see shadowy wisps or ethereal lights coming out of the fort's structure alongside strange smells? What does a ghost smell like, I wonder? You know what? Don't let me know. That's maybe one that's better left not knowing. The reason for the ban after sunset is because local legends say that any person who enters the fort during the night will never be seen again and will become one of the spirits trapped inside. So maybe just stay within the guidelines and follow the signs just this once. And if you're looking for more videos about haunted hotspots, alien sightings, cryptids, creepy crawlies, and basically just about anything scary under the sun and above it, well, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. So click on through, subscribe, stay scared, and don't miss a single scream. But do that after you finish watching this video, okay? We worked hardish on it. Number 4, Tunnel 33. Shimla is said to be one of the most beautiful cities in the entire country of India and happens to also be home to some of the more haunted hotspots. Now this one in particular might not be as scary as some of the other ones in this list. I thought maybe I'd give you a little break before we really got into it. But this ghost has been described as a lot friendlier than your average spirit, more of a Casper, if you will. Tunnel 33 is the longest tunnel in the Kalka-Shimla railway track, built in the late 18th century in 1898. British railway engineer Colonel Balrog was the man in charge of constructing the project. Colonel Balrog, I'm pretty sure he was a Street Fighter character. Colonel Balrog was given a thin deadline and he failed to meet expectations for the tunnel, leading to him being humiliated in his career after the British government was understandably pretty upset with him. Distraught, completely despondent, he ended up taking his own life and was buried near the incomplete tunnel on the railroad tracks, where his spirit has remained ever since. Residents report seeing apparitions of the good colonel through the tunnel, sometimes saying they see him standing, admiring his work, riding his horse, or if you really believe some of the more out there stories, he's even been seen talking to tourists and locals as they pass through, asking questions about his tunnel and if the project is going well and if they're meeting deadlines. The poor guy is still so focused on his work all these years later. Take a break, man, for us, please. A phantasmal 15. You've earned it. There's something very sad about a ghost who's stuck on the land he worked on, unable to move on. He's not interested in haunting or scaring anyone, but just doomed to check in on a project he never got to see completed. If you ever visit the accursed tunnel, and if you happen to see the colonel, tell him thank you, won't you? For me, okay? Tell him that the tunnel looks great and he did a good job. I'm sure he'd appreciate it.
Number 3, Lapril House and Bahe Nupula. These two houses share a similar dark and horrific history. The Lapril House was built in 1920 and was occupied by the head of the Lapril clans, Don Roberto and Donna Victorina. But during the Second World War, Japanese soldiers took over the home and used it as a den to severely harm victims. Much like that Lapril house, Bahe Nupula was used as a base where they inflicted equally inhumane, despicable acts onto women. During the house's Japanese soldier occupation, soldiers would abduct citizens, accuse them of being American spies, and then harm them in every way known to man. The Lapril House is now considered one of the most haunted houses in the Philippines. Caretakers who work at the house have claimed to see headless ghosts dressed in soldiers' uniforms. They've said that they hear doors opening and closing, and some even said that they can still hear the ear-splitting screams and begs from the people who experienced torment in the house. The Lapril House has become a popular tourist attraction, drawing visitors who are intrigued by its rich history and supernatural oddities. Despite its strange reputation, the Lapril House stands as a testament to Baguio's architectural heritage and continues to fascinate both history enthusiasts and ghost hunters. Bahay Napula is a deep red house that is labeled as haunted because of the horrendous acts that Japanese soldiers forced onto abducted victims during World War II. At the time, it is said that Filipino guerrillas first used the house as a safe haven, where they would strategize and come together in the trying time. But Japanese soldiers took over the home. They left them without food until they perished. They violated local women without mercy, and they harmed people at random. The house is currently abandoned, but people who live near the area have reported hearing screams and wails calling out for help, and have even seen a group of ghostly Japanese soldiers walking around the house's property. The acts that were committed against innocent people are appalling and heartbreaking. Again, these houses are another example of deeply saddening locations that have become dark tourism attractions. Number 2, Ozone Disco. On March 18, 1996, at 11:35 p.m., the Philippines witnessed one of the deadliest nightclub disasters in its history, the Ozone Disco tragedy. The incident occurred at the Ozone Disco, a popular nightclub located in Quezon City, Metro Manila. It was a night that would forever haunt the nation's collective memory, leaving behind a legacy of grief, lessons learned, and calls for stricter safety regulations. That horrific night, the club was packed with hundreds of excited people, celebrating the end of the school year. The nightclub had gained a reputation for its trendy music and vibrant atmosphere, which drew a young and energetic crowd. The tragedy unfolded when an electric malfunction led to a massive fire which spread rapidly throughout the disco. The nightclub's inadequate safety measures exacerbated the situation. There was only one narrow exit. The club was at least 300 people over capacity, and the club itself did not have adequate emergency exits. As the flames engulfed the nightclub, screams for help filled the air. People clamored to locked doors, ending up in piles as the hot blazes tore at their skin. Tragically, 162 lives were lost that night, and countless others suffered injuries. Families were torn apart, and the nation was left in mourning. The Ozone Disco tragedy serves as a grim reminder of the importance of stringent safety standards in public establishments. The aftermath of the Ozone Disco tragedy prompted widespread outrage and calls for accountability. Investigations revealed a shocking lack of adherence to fire safety regulations and building codes. The nightclub's owners were subsequently charged with criminal negligence, and several government officials faced disciplinary actions for failing to enforce safety standards. The tragedy also led to significant changes in the Philippines' approach to fire safety and building regulations. It prompted the government to revisit and strengthen existing laws, ensuring that public establishments adhere to safety standards more rigorously. Moreover, the disaster prompted greater awareness among the public about the importance of fire safety and the need for responsible business practices. The Ozone Disco tragedy is a painful chapter in the Philippines' history, but it has not been forgotten. Each year on March 18th, memorial services and remembrances are held to honor the victims and reflect on the lessons learned. The tragedy serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of negligence and the critical importance of prioritizing safety in public places. The abandoned disco has since been boarded up. You cannot legally enter the building where such a tragedy occurred. People who have managed to disregard the public trespassing laws have described hearing the screams of victims, a clawing at the door, and the faint sound of crackling music, sounding as though the notes themselves were burning into ash. Number 1. Manila Film Center. The Manila Film Center is an iconic and controversial structure. It stands as a symbol of both the Philippines' aspirations in the world of cinema and the dark shadows that sometimes loom over the industry. Located on the longshore of Manila Bay, this controversial building was constructed as a venue for the 1982 Manila International Film Festival, an event that planned to showcase both Filipino and international cinema. However, the story behind its construction and the subsequent events have left a permanent mark on the country's history. It was built during the regime regime of the then President Ferdinand Marcos, and the construction of the Manila Film Center was surrounded by secrecy and controversy. To meet the tight deadline for the festival's opening, an estimated 4,000 workers were employed, working round-the-clock in hazardous conditions. Tragically, a portion of the building collapsed on November 17, 1981, burying several workers under the rubble, still alive. At the demand of the government to expedite the center's completion, the workers' bodies, alive and dead, were covered in cement and left entombed within the structure. Despite this tragedy, the Manila Film Center still opened its doors on January 18, 1982, with much fanfare. It became a hub for film enthusiasts and filmmakers, hosting international film screenings and competitions, and most of them had no idea that they were standing on top of a mass grave. However, the controversy surrounding its construction continued to haunt the venue. Rumors of paranormal activities, particularly ghosts of the workers who lost their lives during the construction, further fueled the Manila Film Center's infamy. In the years that followed, the Manila Film Center faced challenges, including changes in ownership and management. It fell into disrepair and was largely abandoned, becoming a dilapidated and spooky relic of the past. Various proposals for its renovation and revitalization were put forward, but none of them came to fruition. Despite its troubled history, the Manila Film Center remains a significant piece of architectural heritage in the Philippines. In recent years, there have been renewed efforts to restore and repurpose the building. Some have suggested transforming it into a cultural and arts center, while others see its potential as value for events and expeditions, or others see its potential as a venue for events and exhibitions. The government has even received and reviewed applications for the renovations and proposals for the building's future. There's no memorial dedication for the workers that lost their lives, and the government does not accept the blame or take responsibility for the tragedy that occurred because of their impatience. Many people travel from all over the world and country hoping to catch a glimpse of the ghosts of fallen workers.